Hey there, Banditos. Welcome to another episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits, where, as always, we fling open the doors of your local comic book shop and bring you interviews with your favorite creators of yesterday and today. But this time, we're not even talking about comic books, even though it is, of course, New Comic Book Day Wednesday. We are talking to two key figures behind the Marvel trading card revolution of the 1990s, Bob Budiansky and Tom Brevoort. So these two returning guests break down the entire phenomenon from that first set in 1990 through all the Jim Lee illustrated X-Men sets and beyond. We talk about how they decided what characters to include, which artists to use, how they came up with those statistics on the back. Spoiler alert, they were made up, and more. So sit back and enjoy this little piece of nostalgia. It's Bob Budiansky and Tom Brevoort. Let's get into it. We're talking not about Marvel Comics today, although it's tangential to the comics, but about Marvel trading cards, which are about to celebrate in 2025 their 35th anniversary, but we couldn't wait that long to talk about them. So I thought maybe the best way to start is just going card by card. Let's start with this. No, kidding.
Bob and I did that already with the X-Men set.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, in book form. Yes. But let's start back at the beginning of time, 1990. Nothing consequential happened before that year. Do you remember the first mention of trading cards for Marvel characters and how it even came up?
Well, I think this would be more me than you, Tom.
Yeah,
because sure. At that time I was executive editor of special projects at Marvel. I believe that was my title.
It was.
So anything that fell outside the realm of the mainstream comic books usually came my way. So in this case, unbeknown to me at the time, I wasn't involved in the deals that led to these things, but our licensing department, along with, Tom DeFalco, the editor-in-chief, made a decision to bring the cards that Marvel had been up until then licensing to outside companies like Creative Images. They would bring it in-house. We would develop them in-house using Marvel talent to create new cards, new artwork, write the copy for the backs of the cards, et cetera, et cetera. Up until then, comic book trading cards had pretty much been outsourced to, like I said, a company that Marvel would license. And they would pick up art from pre-existing publications usually and get somebody to write some text on the back. And they were really done on the cheap. You know, if you looked at them compared to like your typical sports card, you could tell the qualitative difference was pretty huge. You know, the card stock, the way it was printed, the finish, everything was on the cheap compared to your typical sports card of that era. So anyway, it was brought in-house, and then Tom DeFalco, editor-in-chief, whose job was to assign stuff, came down to my office and basically said, "So Bob, what do you know about trading cards?" And I said, "Well, I used to collect baseball cards when I was like in 5th grade. That's about it, Tom." He said, "You're the man. You're the guy. You're going to be in charge of Marvel trading cards from here on." So based on my vast experience in these matters. And that's how I got started with that. And at that time, Tom, I believe you were my assistant, right?
I would have been your assistant at that time. Yeah, I think I still would have been, or I would have been an assistant. Sorry, the timing is getting fuzzy in my head.
Fly by.
but yes, I was working at that point in the office with you.
Right.
Our big back corner office. And we were doing all that sort of stuff, trading cards.
Right.
Posters.
So based on our vast experience in the trading card world, we launched a branch of the Marvel brand that was so successful that Marvel kept producing more and more sets and buying more and more trading card companies in the next couple of years. Yeah, that's how it started.
And this was basically a licensing deal, is that right, with Impel? In the same way that it would be sort of for consumer products for anything else?
The big difference, though, was that like I said earlier, up until the first set of Marvel Universe cards came out in 1990, this was usually done by the licensing company. not in-house. We were in-house editors using our usual talent pool. We were accessing artists and writers and colorists and designers and so on from the people who normally produced our comic books. This wasn't the case usually when prior to that, when the trading cards were licensed to outside companies to produce. They would just, like I said, they would get pickup art from our licensing department. They would give them some books to pull art from or whatever. Who knows? We weren't involved. So, and that was typical of anything, you know, whether it was a trading card or a T-shirt or whatever, you just give it to some other company to create. You know, they might use artwork that pre-exists, but they weren't typically involved in hiring Marvel artists and writers to produce that material. But in this case, we brought it in-house and we did the creative. And yeah, it was still licensed to a trading card company to produce the actual cards and print them and package them and distribute them and market them, because that's what they knew how to do. We didn't know how. Marvel did not do that sort of thing.
Yeah, it was much more. It was still a licensing deal,
Yeah.
but it was much more like the arrangements that had been made with Hasbro that led to G.I. Joe and Transformers.
Right.
You know, Bob worked on Transformers for years and developed the characterizations and the backstories for like dozens of Transformers characters who had only existed at that point as physical toys, who had no history to them. In the same sort of way, this deal with Impel was, they wanted to create, you know, more substantial Marvel cards than had been done before. They thought there was an untapped market there, and at the time, there were a couple of strikes going on in the sports world.
No, time out. Strikes came later.
Were the strikes later?
1994.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at the very least, they saw an opportunity to expand their business in a direction that nobody else, you know, had taken in quite that way.
Yeah.
And you were both, well, Bob, you were the head of the special projects division, which was it only you and Tom?
Yes.
Were part of that division, or was it
much.
At that time, it was just us two, but they kept expanding. I had a staff of about 5 or 6 people eventually.
Yeah, eventually it grew out, and again, you had under you as well at all times the managing editor, the associate editor, which became me at a certain point. But before that, you know, you had Greg Wright, and you had for a brief time Mark McLaurin and so forth. But
Dwayne McDuffie. And,
but they didn't tend. They didn't tend at that point to work directly on the stuff you were doing. They did projects that you assigned them. So
right.
The like Marvel Masterworks and whatever.
We did reprints. We did retail poster program. We did a lot of movie adaptations. Worked with the National Football League. Worked on a lot of different toy properties, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So trading cards was like a whole new direction for us. We didn't do anything like that up until that point.
And Tom, you were as Bob's assistant at the time. Did you? So how did you get involved? Did you have sort of a choice?
No.
Or you were doing anything that was in the department.
Anything that you know came to Bob, I worked on. I was his assistant, so any job he had, I was the pair of hands that was expected to help to get it done.
So let me just clarify to your audience. So when you're an assistant editor, it's just a euphemism for slave, okay? You do whatever the boss says you do, you know? Now, he's risen the ranks quite a bit. He's a Marvel executive VP or whatever your title is these days. But back then, he was a lowly but extremely talented assistant editor, and he helped me on everything I did and made my life a lot easier.
Well, it's very kind of you to say.
Yes.
I tell people...
Yes.
Yes, with no power comes no responsibility.
Right, that's true. Yeah.
And when this project,
willing and able to help me and improve whatever it was that we went in to do together, he would come up with stuff that would make it even better than I thought it would be. But he would always come up with ways to improve it and make sure the quality was maintained at all times. Yeah.
And so among these varied projects that came across your desk, Tom, where did this rank? Were you excited about this one, or were you a little dubious?
Honest answer, when we started, it was another project. Like we had a bunch of things to do, and it was a thing.
Mhm.
And so, it was a fairly involved thing because if you're talking about a set of cards, it's 160 cards, I think, was in that first set. So it's a lot of different pieces to get done. And, there was no existing staff of people. There were no particular freelancers who had been trained in how to write trading cards the way Bob wanted them written yet. All of that stuff kind of got established as through trial and error as we did the first set and then the second set and so forth. So all of it was largely us and mostly Bob and a couple of folks from Impel figuring it out as we went.
And was this considered, it could be both of these, but was there a strategy behind these cards such that it was a way to get new people into the Marvel world, or was it more, or it could be both, a venue for the comics fans to buy more Marvel stuff, but something different than obviously comics?
I think there were a couple of strategies working simultaneously. The number one strategy was licensing department saw this as an opportunity to make more money. We'll make better cards, we'll sell more, we'll work with a major trading card company instead of a minor player in the Marvel licensing, vendors that are out there. Like Comic Images is not the same as Impel. They were not the same level. So we can move into the, no pun intended, major leagues of trading card companies with and work with a higher quality brand, higher quality card, and hopefully attract more buyers and make more sales. So I'm sure that was the overriding direction as far as why did Marvel decide to do this, make more money. However, from editorial point of view, of course, we wanted it to be successful. Underlying everything editors do, they need to make it successful. Otherwise, they won't be working there very much longer. But aside from that, we were very conscious, like, this is an opportunity to present our characters in these little sound bites, basically. That's what a trading card is. It's a sound bite, except you read it instead of hearing it. And you have one shot at a really dynamic image and some punchy dialogue on the back, some punchy text explaining who this character is, and some other information that hopefully fleshes out the character even better. And maybe that will attract an audience who wouldn't otherwise pick up a Marvel comic book. And I know from hearing over the years from all sorts of people who've collected the cards, that's exactly what happened with a lot of people. They bought the cards, they found the characters interesting, and they started buying comic books. So it was a win-win in so many ways for Marvel. Marvel licensed it, they made money from the license, and they definitely pulled in some new readers.
Yeah, I don't think that was anything that we just deliberately planned. It was an end result of the fact that the work that was done was good and really resonated with a bunch of people. Again, I've heard all the same sorts of stories over the years that Bob has, including from you about people who came across these cards, in school, on the schoolyard or wherever, and got interested in them because other people in their circle were interested in them, and then getting fascinated enough to then transition over to buying a comic at the local spinner rack at the drugstore or whatever, and then eventually moving into actual comic shops and the direct market and all of that.
Yeah, it was a good experience for everyone, hopefully. For people working on it like us, and for the people who bought it, and certainly the people who counted up the profits. So all happy.
Yeah, my experience was that it kind of was in parallel with me just about getting into comics, and probably bolstered my interest in the comics because I had transitioned sort of from baseball cards, which I think maybe others did as well. And so it was a nice little entry point while I was getting interested in comics. So I'm sure there were a lot of stories out there in the same light. So in terms of the design, the original template that you came up for the first series, who came up with that, and was it intended to be based on sports cards in this sort of hero shot in the front, or at least profile in the front, and then statistics and some description in the back?
So, okay, you bring up a couple of different things there. So as far as the design, the design and there's the content. So as far as the design goes, initially, because we were just inventing this from scratch, we went to a designer on the Marvel staff who was the assistant production manager, Dawn Geiger. So she's the one who initially designed that first set. And I give her a lot of credit because she was doing this while she was doing her regular job. And that was a lot of work for her. And she did a really nice job getting that initial design put together. And meanwhile, Tom and I were coming up with ideas like, oh, we'll make all the Fantastic Four related characters have a blue border. And we'll make all the Avengers characters have a different color border. So we kind of create like teams, like baseball teams, football teams, So we were trying to create like a team effect by the way we color coded the cards. Now, as far as the content, we did come up with a lot of statistical information, and I hate to disappoint your audience, but let the cat out of the bag. Here's the big secret: we made that stuff up, like how many wins and how many losses. We didn't go back and read every Spider-Man comic book and count up, the wins and losses.
It is absolutely amazing to me how many people took that in that first set took those wins and losses seriously, and how many times over the years I've had to tell them, yeah, those we just made up. Yeah. And how heartbroken they are at that knowledge. We only did the wins and losses the first year. I think a bunch of the elements that we had on the very first set were things that Impel pushed for or liked or wanted. They were really the trading card specialists.
Well, Tom, they wanted to go beyond that. So when we initially were working with Impel and their marketing people or whatever, they had no faith in comic book trading cards. Mm-hmm. They wanted us to design the card artwork so that it wouldn't just be like the Hulk, looking hulkish. It'd be the Hulk, swinging a massive baseball bat.
Yes.
The characters would be doing things that were related to sports, so that they would be connecting to their typical sports collecting marketplace, not the potential comic book collecting markets that might be out there. So they wanted us to jazz up the characters in all these bizarre ways that were really anathema to us. Like, we're not going to take, Spider-Man and put a baseball cap on him or, do stupid things like that. We weren't. So the compromise was we came up with these baseball-like statistics, like wins and losses, like a pitcher would have wins and losses. There was a little feature called "Did You Know" on each card, which was a little odd fact, a little amusing, hopefully, entertaining fact that we could pull out of the character's history. That was directly from baseball cards. I remember something like that from my youth, that there would be a "Did You Know" fact. Mm-hmm. I think it was from my youth. I might have looked at it from more modern cards, but it was from.
I think I remember it as being something that you remembered from when when you were growing up.
And it was I think it was a nice touch. Everybody loved it. Coming up with these little oddball facts about each character. So it wasn't just Spider-Man has a strength of 10 men and he this and that and he got bitten by a radioactive spider. It'd be something, off, another baseball analogy, no pun intended, out of left field, some comments about the character that was unexpected, but actually true.
Right. So, and really, I honestly, it's very much to your credit, Bob, that these cards, particularly, starting out, were not absurd and ridiculous and bizarre, because you definitely argued them down on a bunch of that stuff. Because I remember, bits and pieces of that, you certainly were not going to have the Hulk batting with a big telephone pole or something.
Right. Well, that would look cool though if we did.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely. Well, we could have done a piece that would have made it look cool once.
You should have made the chase cards like that.
But yeah, it was all because they had a very codified set of what they did, whether they were baseball cards or football cards or hockey cards, basketball cards. There were certain things that they were very comfortable with, kinds of things. And over the course of that first set, we kind of had to find ways to adapt them to what we were doing. Once that first year's set was a success and they trusted us a little more. By like the second year, we replaced wins and losses and the nonsense with actual stats. I think we started to do like height and weight from the handbooks and first appearance and things that had relevance to
the Marvel Universe handbooks at the time had stats, had ratings, and like stamina and strength and speed, and we adapted that to the next set. I believe it was the second set.
I think it was the power ratings, which was a thing that that was a huge success, and that they and they loved.
And we made fancier and fancier graphs year after year,
right?
Bar graph to line graphs and whatever else. So after the first year, we were pretty much on our own. No trading card company was telling us you should do this, you should do that, other than they've come up with a direction like, oh, we want to do an X-Men set, or we want to do a higher end masterpiece set, or whatever.
They'd also come to us every once in a while when they had some new technology for chase cards. We can do this now. Could we use this in this next set? And we would figure out what characters would be appropriate or whatnot to use this particular foil or gimmick, whatever it was.
Yeah, we were always happy to. We didn't know anything about the trading card business. So anytime they came to us and said, we have this technology to produce foil cards or hologram cards, whatever, sure, let's go for it. We're in. We're all in. And like Tom said, we'll figure out which characters belong in that subset. But we were always willing to use whatever fancy technology that they were willing to put into the cards. Yeah.
And Marvel Universe is obviously a vast universe with so many characters in it. Even back then, when you were first working on the first set, some of the choices are obvious, but how did you decide who was going to get a card and who was not going to get a card, at least in that first set? And maybe it became more obvious as it went along when you expanded the number of characters.
I think we asked the editors who were in charge of the different characters, like, who's important in your books? Other than the obvious, like we've obviously been, you're going to do the X-Men, you're going to do Wolverine and Storm and Cyclops and so on. But there's a lot of up and coming characters that we weren't aware of, or like maybe characters that had been used 30 years earlier that were coming back and we weren't aware of it until we spoke to editorial teams about what they'd like to see. Is that about right, Tom? Every time after the first set, anyway. Yeah, every time we were starting a new set, I'd end up having to go door to door. Yeah.
Because we really wanted characters that were about to be introduced.
Right.
Characters that were new and thus would be almost like the rookie set. The first year, I think we literally did rookies.
We did have rookies.
Yeah, and those were all characters that were just being launched in their books or whatnot, and that was an easy way to do a subset of cards that made sense to Impel. They know what a rookie is, so they got that.
Right. You gave another baseball reference, sports reference.
Yeah, but as time went on, this is why if you look at some of those sets, Series 2, Series 3, some weird characters in retrospect have cards, and the reason is the editors in question had high hopes for a given character. Right. They thought they were going to be really important, and that character just didn't connect right. So by the next year or 2 years out, they were sort of cast to the wayside. But that was the trick. On the other hand, any of the characters that really popped, all of the X-Force characters had cards almost immediately.
Right.
Because they were excited. The X office was excited about them and said, "Oh, we've got these guys coming up. We're doing this thing." And that one hit. So it was always a little bit of hit or miss every year as we filled that out. But most of it was block and tackle. Like if you're doing a set of Marvel Universe cards, who's in the Avengers right now? Who's the standing X-Men team? Who are the Fantastic Four? You're going to need at least one Spider-Man, probably more like 2 or 3. We would plan every year, and then you'd fill in the gaps around that. So that alone would give you out of a 160 card set, 70 or 80 cards. And then every year we tried to come up with different categories. Teams was always a subset. So in addition to having
famous battles, thing, that kind of thing.
Yeah, first appearances and great team ups and all of these different sort of subsets that would make each set different and distinctive from the one that had been done the year previous. So it wasn't just the same characters and the same cards again and again and again. Every time you rolled out a master set, you had something different to hopefully interest and hook the audience into.
Yeah, I just want to get back to like talking to the editors and getting their input on about who we should feature. So by the time he got to the X-Men, the first X-Men set in 1992, Bob Harris, he was the editor of the X-Men line back then, and he gave us all these brand new characters that were going to be rolled out into the books, and they were being developed by his top-notch creative teams, who then all vanished and started Image Comics a couple months later, and these characters were hardly ever heard of again. So some of these characters like are extremely obscure nowadays because they were pitched by these people who then took a walk and nobody followed up with these characters after that. Although now, Tom, you're the new
I'm gonna bring them all back.
Go look through that set of cards, and anybody who's been forgotten, give them their own book.
Yep.
Big plans.
Yeah.
So did it, the inverse of that, did anyone take you to task for not including a character or one of their favorite characters in a set?
I don't remember. Do you remember? Perhaps.
Yeah, not that I can remember.
Yeah.
Again, partly because their input was sought. If we were building a new set, we'd go to talk to the editors in general. If we were building a specific set, a Spider-Man set, we would talk to the Spider-Man editor and find out what he thought as well as what we thought in assembling that. So they all had a say, and their input was taken on board because we didn't know who was going to be in Spider-Man for the next year. He did. So probably that should carry a little bit of weight.
So on the being taken to task theme, I can talk about this because I don't work for Marvel anymore. So the thing that was taken to task, I believe it was in the first set, the Marvel Universe 1. One of the characters we featured as one of the villains was the Red Skull. I think Tom knows where this is going.
Yep.
And as part of the artwork, if you know the history of the Red Skull, he came out of Nazi Germany. So as part of the artwork, there was a swastika symbol somewhere in the artwork, and which was typical. Like if you saw the Red Skull in a featured in a comic book, there would be Nazi symbology, scattered throughout the artwork in a lot of the stories that he appeared in over the years. Anyway, so a parent, his son brought the cards home, and a parent saw that card and complained to Marvel, like, the son asked, "What is that symbol?" And the parent, I guess, was a little bit bent out of shape that he had to explain to his son what the swastika meant. Which is a part of history. It's not a pleasant part of history, but he felt it was inappropriate. I suppose that would be in a trading card for kids, even if it was associated with a major villain. We weren't promoting it. We were saying that's who he is. So as a result, that made it all the way up to upper management at Marvel, to probably the president of the company. And from then on, swastikas were banned in Marvel Comics. You couldn't show it in a Red Skull story or any other story. Now, of course, back in the 1960s, one of Marvel's top books for many years was Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos. What do they do every issue? They what Nazis? I guess you couldn't do that anymore back in the 90s.
Right.
Or they'd have to be guys who kind of look like Nazis, but didn't wear the armbands or didn't have that kind of symbology to scattered around the background. So anyway, so our cards changed the course of Marvel after that.
I mean, it's interesting that kind of controversy came from a card, because there's so many examples of the actual comics and how the comics code came about and all that kind of stuff, but that the card was the thing that sort of set it off internally in the company.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
Well, it just shows that the upper management at Marvel, the people who weren't editorial but were just running the company, they were, over the years, there was a lot of very clueless people in that stratum. Just put out the comics. We'll count the profits, and we'll leave you guys alone until something like that popped up.
Makes sense. So in terms of the artists, and this may be different from series 1 to series 2 and 3, but how were they chosen in general, but also how were they assigned to certain characters? Did they have any, input, or was it really an assignment as to what characters?
I'll take the first part, and I think Tom will jump in, but he had a lot to do with working with the artists. But initially, I think we had to put out a trial set of like 20
Yeah,
cards.
we did a sample set of 20 cards.
20 cards. And so we hired one artist, Tom
Mhm.
Morgan, to do all the cards. So he did the pencils. I'm not sure if he inked them all, but he penciled all of them.
I think he inked them as well. I think he penciled and
We just
inked.
needed to get something out the door real quick. And so, of course, we used him for, our popular characters. But subsequent, following that, when we got the green light to go ahead, I think we were a bit more selective about which artists worked on which characters. We tried to get artists who were associated with characters, or if artists wanted particular characters to we'd give them a list, and if they wanted to draw somebody and it hadn't been assigned to somebody else, we said, sure, you can do that. Something like that, right? That was kind of a
the good thing about the trading cards in terms of artist recruitment is that they paid well.
yeah, they did.
Each card paid essentially about a half page rate. So you could do, and they were done at a size where you could do 4 cards on a board. So if you did a full page of 4 cards, you were paid effectively for 2 pages, double your page rate. Right. So typically when we would go out to artists, we wouldn't go out to them to do 1 card. We'd say, well, if you do 4 cards, you get twice your rate. And what 4 cards should you do? And I got a master. Every time I would create these, it wasn't quite a spreadsheet because I do it all by hand, but it was like a spreadsheet, on long 8.5 by 14 paper that I gridded out with 160. Here's all the cards. Here's the character, and here's the artist and inker and so forth. And I would just call people up and go through it with them. Typically you would go to somebody like Ron Friends because he was drawing Thor. And so you'd call Ron up and say, do you want to do cards? Oh, you do? Great. Well, okay, do Thor. We have a Loki card. You should probably do that. We have a Thor Greatest Battle card. So maybe you do that one too. And then who else do you like? And I would negotiate back and forth. Well, here are some of the characters that we have open. Oh, you want to do Nightcrawler? Okay, that sounds good. Your Nightcrawler would look cool. All right, fine. You're in. And more often than not, we'd square them all off. Not everybody did things in 4s, but a lot of people did them in 4s simply because it was just cleaner that way.
So 2 cards stand out that first set as far as who did them to me. Mm-hmm. Number 1 was Aunt May, because the busiest man at Marvel was John Romita Sr. He was the art director. He was constantly doing all sorts of projects for corporate and for everybody else, and he just had a tremendous amount of work on his plate, and he really couldn't be bothered with doing these petty little trading cards. But I think I went over him and said, I think it was me, we really want you to do Aunt May. Spider-Man had already been drawn by Tom Morgan, I believe.
Yes.
He was available, but he just did the classic Aunt May, so he drew Aunt May for us.
Right.
And the other one I think that's the only card he drew for that set.
No, he did. He drew all of. There was a subset that first year that were sort of like gag cards, where the front would be Spider-Man interviewing one of the Marvel heroes, and the back would have a punchline. Yeah. He ended up drawing all of those. So that set of 8 or whatever.
But it began with Aunt May, at least in my mind.
Yep.
I remember it. We really wanted to do that. And then the other one that stands out is the Stan Lee card. So the only set where we had a Stan Lee card. And somebody recalled, it might have been me, I don't know if it was me or somebody else, that Marvel had a fan magazine for its fans called Foon for many years. And there was a cover of an illustration of a portrait of Stan Lee, but he was shown, his face was shown, it was just a close-up of his face, and he was shown with all different pieces of his face being different superheroes. So they'd be part of an Iron Man mask and Thor's helmet with the little wing on it. I think some Thing skin, and I think his fingers were on fire like Johnny Blaze, and not Johnny Blaze,
Johnny Storm,
Ghost Rider, like Johnny Storm, the Torch, and so on and so forth. There was a really brilliant illustration that had been done, several years earlier, and we just wanted to reuse the artwork. Now, in theory, Marvel owned the art. When Marvel commissioned somebody to do artwork, they own the rights to the artwork. But we wanted to be fair to the artist. So we researched who the artist was, because we didn't know. A guy named Arnie Sawyer. And it turned out Arnie Sawyer ran a graphic design company crosstown from Marvel, just like, a 15-minute walk. And so I contacted him, and I said, look, we want to pay you whatever the going rate was. Maybe I think it was like $200 or something at the time.
Something like that.
Whatever the going rate was for a trading card illustration. You've already done the illustration. We just want you to say, okay, and he was initially really leery, like, I don't know, maybe I should ask for more money. So, listen, this is all we're going to pay you. You've already done the work. You're not even doing any more work. Everybody else is paying this amount. They got to do work. We just want to use your piece of artwork, but it shows Stan Lee in such a fascinating, fun way. And so finally he kind of caved in. Turns out Arnie, like this is probably 10 years after he did this illustration for Foom. Besides being this ace graphic designer who's doing mostly like movie ads for the New York Times and things like that, he loved comic books and he loved Marvel. And so beginning with the next, I think it was with the very next set.
It was the next set.
He became, except for one or two sets, on the sets that we worked on, he became our designer. He designed almost all the sets after Marvel Universe 1. And it was great working with him. He was brilliant. He was fun to work with. He and his staff, they were like on the cutting edge of, this is the early 90s, so they were on the cutting edge of graphic design computer programs, which were pretty new back then. And they came up with great ideas and great designs. We would talk it out, and they would show us, different ideas. And it was very easy to work with him because we just walk across town to his office and hang out and look over the artwork together and figure out what to do with it. So from that one illustration of Stan Lee, we found this ace graphic designer, and he found like a whole new career designing trading cards. And he wound up not only designing trading cards for us, I think he wound up designing them for DC Comics as well eventually.
Yeah, he did.
He went over to the other side, but he continued working for Marvel. But anyway, so out of that one card, that's what happened.
Yeah, what a discovery, or what a boon to you guys.
Just kind of stumbled into that one,
yeah.
And he almost said, "Nah, I'm not going to accept your measly $200. Go find some other artwork." He almost walked away from all of that. He's a great guy. So now that we know each other,
that's a good story.
Yeah.
So going into the second series, after the first series was a success, and maybe the artists that worked on it word got around about page rates and such, did you have folks banging down your door to do the second and third series for the cards in terms of the artists?
People had more of an understanding of what it was. Like the one guy in the second series who he had done a couple of cards for us, I think the first year, one or two. And he was one of the first guys we called up because we loved him. Bob loved his work. I loved his work. And he was always great at getting a really iconic shot of a character into the space, was Arthur Adams.
Yeah, I want to break in. I love him so much that I recently joined his Kickstarter campaign and bought this book.
There we go.
It was in the mail about a month ago.
Yeah,
I have it as well.
That's how much I still love him. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Tom.
So I called up once we had the checklist figured out for the next set. I called him up, and he pretty much said, like, I'll do like 40 of them. And I had to come back to you, Bob, and go, Art wants to do 40 of these. Do we want him to do 40 of them? Do we trust him enough to get through? And you basically said, hey, let him try. If he starts to run late, we can always reassign, the last bunch of cards if he can't get through all of them. And so in that second set, he did a big chunk of them. And being Art Adams, he did them completely stupidly, which is to say, he did them on duo shade board, which is a board that you could apply a chemical to, and you would get different hatching and cross hatching patterns. So it was it allowed you to create a little more depth in the line art. But he would also tend to do the cards, like I said, typically you do them at a size where you could fit 4 on a board. He would do them like half board size or board size. And these enormous pieces would come in that would get shrunk down to a trading card. And with the duo shade and everything, there were some concerns in a couple of places. We had to talk to the colorist, Paul Mounts, a little bit about this. Like, these are heavy illustrations. Like there's a lot of line work, there's a lot of fine detail. You're going to probably have to go a little lighter and a little less dark on the colors. But those cards were dynamite. Like that, every card he did was a standout winner in that set. So that was like the big success of that second year. Everybody else did great too. And again, most of our regular rank and file artists who are working on regular monthly books or were just around in the industry, even if they hadn't been doing regular books for us, they were doing stuff. At that point, they knew what the cards were, and they were they were happy certainly with the fact that they paid a lot better. You could kind of do one almost as a fun exercise. Like I'll do a card or two. That seems easy and cool. It's a figure. There's only as much background as you need to establish the scene. It can be as dynamic as you want it to be. There's not really a story that you have to worry about. It's really just show me the character looking as cool as possible, and people went for that in a big way.
Yeah, the other thing I want to point out about the second set was that one thing I was striving to do was the first set we really still had like 1 foot in the sports world in terms of design. Our design was fine, but it was a little bit, static compared to what we knew we could do. So I was really striving to make it a much slicker, more modern looking design compared to the first set, and really break the bonds of like, these aren't sports cards. These are Marvel cards. Mm-hmm. They stand out because they have great design, great color, great images, and that was what I was trying to achieve as far as the look of them all. The overall look of them.
Yeah, I remember that first set. We did the names in one of those sports, sort of like curly banners.
Yeah, banner. Right.
And they were an enormous pain in the ass. Because the way we had to do those with the technology that existed in those days is you would typeset the name, and then somebody in the bullpen would literally have to cut out every letter and shift them back and forth. There was a night, like the Friday before these cards had to go to press, there was a night that I was at the office with a couple of the bullpen guys till like 10 o'clock. Bob was like, "Get this all finished. I'm going home." And I, as the assistant, stayed there with these guys till the wee hours as they, and in certain cases I, sliced up these tiny little letters and waxed them into position of these things. As it got later, as we moved later on, by the second set, certainly by the third set, a lot of that was much more being done digitally. Like it was all computer. All the names were typeset that way. All the text on the back was typeset that way. And my God, that was an immediate quantum leap from just the year before.
Well, also, like I said, Arnie Sawyer came aboard as our graphic designer, and he and his staff were much more skilled than anybody at Marvel, using what was very early Photoshop programs
Yeah. He had
Quark in Photoshop.
Yeah, Quark Express was the big one when we started, and we had to actually get it in our office in order to be able to do this stuff. So we had like the best computer in the place was in Bob's office, and it wasn't by modern standards, it wasn't very good, but it could run these programs and deal with what were then considered enormous files. Marvel was still very low tech, very stone rocks and wood, we were by default on the cutting edge of that, and then we were able to use that tech on other things that we worked on because we'd started to figure out how it could be done, and so we designed trade paperback back covers on it and things, because suddenly it was there and we began to get some expertise at how to actually use it.
Yeah. Until you made me sort of focus on it, I wouldn't have thought that those banners would have been probably the most difficult part of the card. But now that I'm seeing that anytime letters are not in a straight line, I can imagine is just a humongous pain, especially pre-design, tools.
Any one of them is easy. When you have 160 of them, it gets hard.
Sure. I'm probably not alone in this in terms of discovering artists from the cards. right? So I was aware of, for instance, Art Adams' work, but the fact that he had so many cards in that second set really, I think, made me and a lot of other folks sort of stand up and say, oh, who's this guy? What book is he on? What book is he going to be on? And I remember that happening with a future set after that with Joe Jusco, who I think did a full set, right?
Yes, he did.
His paintings. Yeah. Same thing there. Did you get a lot of feedback that way, or even from the artists, that people are giving them more attention, not only from the comics, but from the cards?
Well, I've seen Joe talk about the cards, recently, and with friends on Facebook. He'll say things like, to this day, people come up to him at conventions with those cards more than anything else for him to sign or talk about it. And he has such a huge amount of work to draw upon. But apparently, according to him, that made the biggest impression of what he. I hope I'm quoting him, paraphrasing his quotes correctly. I think he said that on more than one occasion.
And like he had been doing painted covers and things for Marvel for years, but they had mostly been on the black and white magazines. So a lot of Savage Sword of Conan and some Punisher and things like that. And he had done some superhero covers. He did a Deathlock cover for us.
He actually had done a few things for me as an editor. In my editorial role, I had a Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yep.
NFL Super Pro. Night Cat.
Yeah, and posters. He did a couple of different posters.
They're all great, and I think we worked with a lot of different painters over the years, and some of them are really into Marvel, and some of them weren't. They were just good illustrative painters. But Joe really loved Marvel Comics, and it showed.
Yeah, and that doing that set sort of exposed him to sort of the mainstream of Marvel fandom. Because most of the stuff that he'd done before that wasn't like it wasn't Marvel stuff, and it wasn't like it was so far away, but it wasn't Spider-Man, and it wasn't X-Men, and it wasn't, and so suddenly, and his name was one of the selling points in that first Marvel Masterpieces set. He was promoted as the person that was painting the whole set, and so I think that really shone a spotlight on his work and made a lot of people who just weren't aware of it because they weren't paying a lot of attention to what posters we were putting out or who was doing covers on Savage Sword or whatever it is. It made them pay attention to him and notice him from out of everybody else. And he did great work on that set, even though I think to this day he's still unhappy with a bunch of those cards because he had to produce so many paintings in such a short amount of time, relatively, that he had to take shortcuts that he wasn't entirely happy with. But I have no doubt that definitely increased his visibility in the marketplace.
Marvel's coming out. Marvel licensed some publisher, I forget who, to come out with a book of those trading cards, and I'm supposed to be I should be not on this podcast right now. I should be writing the foreword to that book. They've asked me to write the foreword to the book. But yeah, I think it may be hard for people to understand nowadays, 30 years after that set. But back then, it wasn't common for people to see their favorite superheroes painted, or depicted in a painterly manner. It was, usually black line, traditional artwork, traditional comic book artwork. So to see those 104 Joe Jusco cards painted, showing all these incredible color, all the characters looking so three-dimensional, so unlike what they're usually depicted as. It was a real revelation for the trading card community, and especially the trading card community who knew Marvel Comics, who were comic book fans, and they saw the characters like they'd never seen them before. And Joe really rose to the occasion.
Oh, yeah, for sure. He certainly raised his own profile, but I think he raised the profile of what comic cards can be, right. And the sort of the quality and the sort of depth that they could achieve. I wanted to ask also in other sets, for inkers and colorists, were there the same array of talent working, or did you want to maintain, an inker that would go along with many different pencilers, maybe to achieve some sort of consistency, or a colorist that goes across more cards than others?
Well, the colorist is the simpler one. I believe in almost every set, we would use one colorist to do the whole thing, and more often than not, it was Paul Mounts. And Paul would produce those cards in what used to be called blue line, where you'd send the black and white artwork out and get a non-photographic blue printout printed on watercolor paper with a clear plastic acetate, and he would do full rendered watercolor paintings.
The plastic acetate had the black line on it.
Yes, the plastic acetate would go over the top.
Image, but it would be separate from the image.
So that coloring was a lot more sophisticated than the 64 color, hand separated type of coloring that most comic books at that point were using. The cards could afford to go a little further, and by the end of our tenure, we were experimenting with more some computer generated coloring and things. So they always had a somewhat more sophisticated or more fully realized look than a typical comic book. In terms of the inkers, it usually came down to whoever you were reaching out to draw a particular card. So if you went to Ron Friends, most of the time you'd go to the inker who was inking Ron Friends on Thor or whatever. And if that inker happened to be busy, you would either talk with Ron or to get suggestions, or just go, okay, Joe Sinnott's got time in his schedule. Joe can ink a few cards. He'll always do a nice slick job. So we had a cadre of people, because Bob's office was special projects. So we did a lot of different things that was artwork for, a variety of licensed ephemera. Hulk bubble baths and role playing game modules and toys. We did a lot of artwork for the early Toy Biz action figures and such. So we had a bunch of like a pool of freelancers that we would turn to fairly regularly, who were good at doing that sort of clean, very John Romita, down the middle, this is what a Marvel comic looks like, sort of a look. And so whenever we needed somebody, in a case like this on the trading cards, we knew a bunch of people, and they knew us, that we could reach out to and go, hey, would you be up for inking these 4 cards? I need them on Thursday.
My impression was getting quality inkers to work on our cards was never a problem.
Not at all.
If anything, they wanted, could you give me more? Because they were simple jobs compared to their usual work, and they, like we said, they paid well. They paid basically double rate. So between being simple and paying well, it was easy to get inkers. Yeah.
That was the thing. That was the thing we did on the Mark Bagley Spider-Man set, because Mark penciled that entire set, and they were most of the character cards were done as 9-up. So it's a single 9-card illustration that's subdivided into 9 cards. For each 9-up, we went to a different inker. Right. So if you go through that set, it's 100 cards by Mark, and whatever 90 of them are all in fleets of 9, inked by 10 different inkers. So it gives you a little bit of visual variety, but it all still looks like Bagley.
Right. And if you know anything about trading cards, I'm sure you do. The reason we went to these 9-up 3x3 patterns of cards for that set, and for Marvel Universe 4, and a little bit for the X-Men 1 set we did with Jim Lee, was because trading card collectors collect cards in books with these plastic sleeves that hold 9 cards. Yeah. So we were instructed by Ken Baroff, who was our main liaison with Impel, and then later Skybox and Fleer. He's the one who said, you should really think about, instead, like we were thinking, like, put everything in groups of 10. There were 40 villains, there were 60 heroes. So you should really think about in terms of 9, because people collect in terms of 9, and so we started adapting at first with the X-Men set, and then we would do entire sets where everything was a multiple of 9, where everything broke down into groups of 9. So we learned on the job.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that, but now it makes complete sense. Coming from a baseball card collecting background, I have these binders with a million
That's it.
cards.
That's it exactly.
Yeah.
That is exactly
You
it.
put them together, they look great,
Yeah.
as a one image that all fits together, and you don't realize it when you're collecting each card, but each card focuses on a single character.
Right.
Right.
And if you had 7 of those cards in one of those holders, you went crazy buying packages until you could get the last 2 to fill it out.
And by the way, Marvel Universe 3, you may not realize, so that came out on 2 different sheets of 100 cards or 90 cards. I forget the exact number.
100 cards, I think it
100
was.
card sheets, were they? Might have been small. It might have been 90. But anyway,
Might have been.
anyway, so if you notice that you showed me earlier, you had a couple of cards in Marvel Universe 3, if you could hold them up.
Yeah.
So they all have this kind of cosmic background. You see that? They're kind of like starry, and there's different like that one of whoever that guy is, the
Weapon Omega.
Yeah, it has like some kind of star bursting in the lower left corner. If you put all 100 cards together, or 90 cards, whatever it is, from each sheet, it forms one image.
It's a continuous background.
Yes.
Continuous background. We hired Joe Jusco to do an entire painted background that would go behind all the cards for each sheet. So there were 2 separate backgrounds, and he had to create glows around certain characters. It was very precise, And initially he was a little too abstract, and I had to go back to him and say, no, I want this to look like the universe. Like, don't draw just kind of like a shape, or a kind of a irregular shape or something. Show like a star, show the Milky Way, show celestial objects. So he went back in and he kind of touched it up and got it to where we wanted it to be. So if you put them all together, you'll see that the entire thing fits as one image. And
we still have up at the Marvel offices. I know this because it's right by the printer. So when I'm waiting for stuff to print out, I'm always staring at the thing. We have one of those uncut 100 sheets.
Oh, I have them all. If you want to pull
framed
I'll run upstairs
up
and get it. I could show it to you on screen if you want.
Tom, I guess this question will go to you, but we were talking a little bit earlier about the chase cards in the introduction. So was that an Impel invention?
The idea of chase cards, I don't know if it was an Impel invention. It was a trading card company invention. All trading card sets of that era, if you look at the sports cards of that era and whatnot, they would have chase cards, which were cards that included some extra technology or enhancement to make them special, and they were rarer in the sets as a result. The name chase card is exactly what it implied. You could probably fill out a full set of 100 cards. You didn't have to buy that many packs to be able to achieve that. But to get all of the chase cards, because they were proportionally so much rarer, you had to buy a lot more, which was the trading card company's intent. We want to sell more cards. I seem to recall that in the first year we did them, because the chase card was a 6th card.
Mm-hmm.
You'd get packs of, I think it was 5 cards typically in a pack. But if a chase card was in there, it was a 6th card. And people figured out that you could tell the difference in the feel or the weight or something of those first packs, and were able to dig through boxes and pull out the ones that had the chase cards. So that was something that Impel and we were able to prevent on later sets, because those were the cards that were always like the most special. And I think the first year, if I'm remembering right, we just did enhanced versions of pieces of art we'd already done, like elsewhere in the card. So the Spider-Man shot that was on foil or whatever was the same art as the main Spider-Man card. But in later sets, we would commission art specifically for each of those chase variants. And that just made them, it increased their allure, their luster. It made people want them more. If they weren't, you couldn't just get that piece of art if you're just buying the regular ones. You had to go get the chase card if you could.
So this is X-Men by Jim Lee. Okay. Oops, let me Is it better? See, when I hold it in front of the camera, I can't see what I'm doing.
Yeah,
So-
I know. I know
So
the feeling.
if you look at the bottom of this,
Yeah, there it is.
danger room.
That's
There's
what I
6
remember.
cards, and these are, and on this side of the danger room, let me find the other side, here. Okay, that's the rest of the danger room here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More cards. So when you put them all together in a plastic sleeve and a binder, it's 9 cards. It forms a danger room.
Yeah.
And as you could see, I'm going to pull in more. Each portion of the danger room focuses on one single character.
Yep.
So here's 6 characters featured prominently on these 6 cards. All right, so that's the X-Men card. That's the first time we experimented with doing the 9-ups, the nine card sets. And then we got a little crazier. So 9 cards. We could do better than 9. We could do, drum roll, please. This one, yes. We could do 100 or 90 or whatever this is. This is Marvel Universe 3. And as you can see, the backgrounds connect all the cards.
Yeah.
If you put them all together, and you're lucky enough to know somebody like me that has extra sheets like this, you can hang it on your wall as one big image.
Which is what we did at Marvel.
Right. So this is Marvel Universe 3. This is one of the sheets. There's 2 different sheets for this. And I don't know, like I said, it's 100 or 90. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, you're right, Tom. It's 200 cards. See, Tom knows everything. I would be lost without it. Okay. And then with Marvel Universe 4, we went completely with the 9 blocks. So you can see Marvel Universe 4.
Yeah.
See, like there's different images that are drawn 9 cards that all fold together as one image.
Yeah. So on that set, we would hire an artist to do 9 cards. Like that was kind of the buy-in because you needed one person to do the whole 9-part image.
Yeah, and we did it for 2 different sheets. So we did it for the second sheet as well, at least for part of the second sheet. Then these cards at the bottom, they were like different battles or something. So we couldn't make 9 cards fit together like that. So anyway, but we had a lot of fun coming up with all these different ways of presenting the cards and ways that really took advantage of the fact that collectors put them in binders and so on. So
yeah, I really love the 3rd set out of those, and probably because I think that's where I kind of faded back. So I'm not as familiar with the 4th and 5th, but the fact of having the connected background, but also having the figure sort of break the plane and come into the background from their individual like the little windows, I thought just kind of was a very genius move. It just makes it so much more dynamic. And not to mention the background when you're talking Marvel Universe, like there's a universe right there. So
right. Literally
that little
universe.
Yeah, exactly, that little I was going to say a metaphor, but it's not, it's literal. So that was very cool. So we had been talking when you were away, Bob, about the chase variants, and I thought it's interesting that this was introduced so successfully in the cards, and eventually the comics got to it, but it's seemingly the like variant covers and things like that, and chase covers didn't seem to like immediately grow out of the card variants. Is that was that something that like a lesson learned just belatedly, or were you trying to figure out from the comic standpoint how to work that in?
When I was there, we weren't doing so much variant covers. We were doing special technology covers.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think they were happening simultaneously. I don't think editorial was driven by what we were doing on trading cards. It was just the direct market, was open to higher price. It was a way to make special comic book issues, like issue 200 of this or 300 of that, make them more special and use these technologies to up the price so Marvel can make more profit on them.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
knew Marvel knew they were going to sell a lot of copies. It was a special edition. It was, the number 200 issue, whatever. And yeah, if we do that and give it a special finish of some sort, or metallic or whatever, we could up the price a buck, and there's more money to be made.
Yeah, that was all sort of simultaneous development. It wasn't inspired by what we were doing on
Right.
trading cards. It was all happening at the same time, and that all grew out of one Hulk cover that Bobby Chase put out. They were doing the issue of Hulk. Peter David and Dale Keown did it, where they merged all the Hulks into the new Smart Hulk. And for that issue, they designed this cover where they wanted to use not a regular ink, but like a fluorescent green ink as the background. It was a fifth color ink. It cost a little more money to manufacture. I think my memory is if they raised the price on that issue, they didn't do it by much because nobody was sure what was going to happen. But that issue sold out like that, and they had to go back to press and do a second printing and do another one. And at that point, everybody started looking at, specialty ink, silver ink and gold ink and whatnot. And then as our manufacturing department started to do these and started to talk with the printers would say, well, you could do foil. Well, you could do embossing. You could do, die cut. And so everyone enabled you to both, drive sales of units, and also, as Bob says, increase your cover price so your actual, profit margin was bigger. And we beat those into the ground. We did everything under the sun, whether it was a good idea, whether it was a bad idea, whether it was needed or not. Once that became a thing, it became a rock rolling down a hill that nobody could stop it. It was going to get to the bottom one way or the other.
Yeah, as an editor, not just me, but the editorial staff in general, there was a period in the 1990s when anything that was could remotely be marketed as a special issue, people from the sales department would kind of march in and say, okay, what special cover can you give us for this? We want to up the price. We want to be able to make more bucks on this. How are we going to market this so that we can, say it's a special thing and show it by the way it's printed or whatever. And, I wound up coming up with a lot of the ideas for the books that I was editing at that time. But everybody was, kind of put into that boat. Anybody who had a line of comics that they were overseeing.
Yeah, I have practically all of them.
Yes.
I have a special place in my heart. But the formats, what was interesting, I think, and what was I trying to get to is that they were not, the comics that used these gimmicks were not sort of rarity driven in the same way that the chase cards were.
Right.
That came sort of later, I think, with the variant covers that would only go out with one every, 5 issues.
We did that. We did it occasionally. They did a version of the Todd McFarlane Spider-Man 1. When Spider-Man 1 turned out to be a huge success, they did a special version with a different, I forget whether it was the gold ink edition or whatever. They did a special edition that was low run, and like every comic shop got one, sort of as a thank you for the success of the book. And then those shops could charge whatever they felt that they could get for that one because it was rare and so forth. So on occasion there'd be things like that, but they were more gratuities than things that were actively being sold because of the enhancement.
Right. Okay. Couple more questions before we wrap up. One is that obviously your competitors got in the game, maybe certainly later than you did. So DC had its own line with, chase and hologram cards and stuff. Didn't seem to garner as much attention. What do you think? Was it just getting on the scene earlier that made you more successful, or what? How can you compare? If you know enough about the DC cards to sort of compare why one was more successful than the other?
Well, I think Marvel's characters were more popular, back then and today, probably, certainly in the movie industry. And I don't think we paid much attention to, what else was happening. I think the fact that we got in there first, obviously, we made it obvious to anybody who was paying attention that there was a market for editorially produced trading cards as opposed to licensed produced trading cards, which where it was done on the cheap. That there was a market for these upscale cards, and you could produce a lot more cases of cards and sell a lot more cards if they were done right. And so DC, obviously they got in the game, and I think other publishers got in the game, but it didn't matter to us. Like, we would just, every year after the first year, like every year, wrong licensing, Impel or Flea or whoever it was that we were dealing with, we would sit down and say, okay, what are we planning to do this year? The first year we did one set. The second year we did one set, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Third year we did 3 sets. Every year we were like adding to. It sounds like Marvel Studios.
Yeah.
After we prove that this works, we kept expanding the line of the kind of cards we were putting out. So it wasn't just Marvel Universe. It was a X-Men set. It was a Marvel Masterpiece set. It was a Spider-Man set, and so on. And what other companies were doing wasn't really relevant to what we were doing.
Yeah, the other thing about the DC cards, and I think that they produce some perfectly fine sets, but every year when their sets would come out, they would tend to more resemble the set we did the previous year. Like, they never leapfrogged us. They never had an approach or a chase technology or anything that we ever looked at and went, oh, why didn't we think of that? We should have done that. In every case, it really seemed like they were following. And again, perfectly good artists and I assume perfectly good editors and whomever worked on those sets. Those weren't bad cards, but they weren't at the forefront really pushing and innovating this stuff the way Bob was. They were all kind of following in the footsteps, and I'm sure, some of those sets, I think the DC set was done by Impel Skybox. And I'm sure, what they heard from them was, this is what Marvel did last time. It was very successful. You should do something like this. And in the meantime, Bob was coming up with what the next set would be, and pushing the envelope so it was a little bit more interesting or different or spectacular, or did something that the previous sets hadn't done. So I suspect that had something to do with it too.
I will say the one concern I had with the DC sets coming out eventually, they didn't come out like immediately. I think it took them a couple of years to get.
It did, yeah.
They wound up using the same designer we did. I'm not sure if it was from the get-go, it might have been, but they wound up using Arnie Sawyer, and we were all based in New York City back then. I think my only concern, and by this time, I think by the time they got around to using Arnie, I think myself and Tom and my staff, we were transitioning out of cards. It was like moving over to Bill Jemis, who was with Marvel and brought in to oversee the cards, and we were kind of getting out of doing it ourselves. So it didn't matter too much. But my only concern was, as we were still doing them, and Arnie was taking work from DC, it was like, gee, I hope he doesn't give them any of the good ideas that we want. He's our Arnie. He's not their Arnie.
Right.
I was a little bit, but a job is a job. I couldn't begrudge Arnie for going for the jobs and getting some work for him and his staff. But like I said, we were already sort of moving on from cards and doing other things, so it wasn't that big a concern. But there was a little bit of overlap with our time on cards and DC coming in with their cards. And they did look good. I don't remember them in detail, but I remember being impressed by them initially. They looked pretty good.
Yeah, they did some good looking sets.
Yeah.
I remember the Kingdom Come set looking good, for example. There would be certain types of cards they did in their first set, because they were DC. They could do things like, here are the different generations of characters. So here's your Jay Garrick Flash and your Barry Allen Flash and your Wally West Flash or whatever. And those, I think they even did those as 3-ups. So by that point we were doing 9-ups. So we were already 3 times past that. But still, it was a cool idea. Here's Golden Age Green Lantern and Hal Jordan Green Lantern and modern Green Lantern, and like that's a solid. A solid idea for that particular line of of characters.
You do remind me now. I do remember we did do one triptych or 3-up,
Mhm.
which was with Jim Steranko.
Yep. Yep.
For Marvel Masterpieces 2 set.
2. Yep.
Yeah, that set, instead of having one single artist like Joe Jusco, we divided the setup among a whole bunch of painterly type artists, and Jim Steranko was one of them, and he did Captain America, and
he did the Golden Age characters. Cap, Namor, and the Human Torch.
Human Torch, right? So it all formed one image across, but it was
in front of a big like gold Nazi style eagle that we had to call him back. You had to call him back and go, we need you to change this a little bit, Jim, because it just looks too much like an SS eagle. and he didn't see it at first, but he was good. He made the adjustment, and it was fine.
Right.
So last question, we've seen a book compiling the X-Men set with Jim Lee, Bob, which you contributed heavily to. There it is. And you mentioned that there are plans afoot for a Joe Jusco, I think, book about his set. Are there any plans that either of you know about for the greater Marvel Universe sets, omnibuses or any other kind of book collections?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it really, I mean, the X-Men book was licensed to Abrams. Is that an Abrams book?
Yes.
Yeah, and so they're doing at least one more now, and they've done some other similar things like the Marvel Value Stamp book, and they're doing a book of all the Marvel calendars right now and so forth. So assuming these books do well, I wouldn't be surprised that they do more. Also by just a fluke, we're reissuing, I think it's about 20, the number may be a little off, about 20 of the Greg and Tim Hildebrandt pieces from Marvel Masterpieces 3 as variant covers on books. There's a variant cover program coming up.
That's nice.
So they'll be, more or less at full size, probably at the size they were painted rather than the trading card size. But a bunch of those, I've signed out a bunch of those over the course of the last couple of weeks. So those will be in stores, I guess, within a month.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I know some of the cards. When I was doing research for the X-Men book, I found out like a whole bunch of the cards were used as covers like 10 years ago.
Yeah, and even when the cards were coming out, like we did at least 2 or 3 different. They were budget buster books because I put them together where we would do a little limited series that was just the art from cards.
Yeah, I remember that. Yes, we did.
Marvel
did like a limited series just reprinting the cards, but I'm talking about these were actually used for X-Men and X-Men related covers.
Yeah,
images from the cards themselves that Jim Lee produced decades earlier. Yeah. I don't know how happy he would be about it since he's been working for DC for a couple of decades.
I don't know if he would be super happy, but I'm sure like he was happy to get the check.
Yeah, money's money.
Do you ever think there'll be another set or any kind of trading card project?
There are still outfits that license Marvel trading cards, but from what little I can tell, like that business is not what it was in the 80s and 90s either. Like just trading cards in general are not as much of a thing. And so nobody has yet shown up with a deal that was as aggressive and as potentially monetarily fulfilling as those Impel Skybox Fleer years. So could there be? Absolutely, but you just need the conditions to be right and for somebody to come. I don't know that Marvel is going to produce a full set, ourselves. I mean, that said, we've done a bunch of trading cards over the years as promotional items. I know we did a bunch for when we did the recent Heroes Reborn storyline in Avengers. We did cards of all the Squadron Supreme characters that were in that as kind of a giveaway because I had to write them all. It was like, I remember doing this. think I have here actually. This too is just a coincidence. I ended up, I would freelance and write a lot of the copy that was on the back of the cards, even when I wasn't working on a set. Like I don't think I did. Oh, this is not the right book. Oh well. I don't know that I did any work on Marvel Universe 3. I think that was Dave. By that point, David Wall was assisting Bob, and I think he was the assistant editor on that. But I wrote like a third of them. And I still somewhere around here. It's not that loose leaf book, but somewhere around here I still have the book where I wrote them all in longhand because in those days I didn't have a computer. Marvel barely had a computer. And I would write them all out longhand, and then we would type them into the template when I got into the office.
And we're back. What a great time it was talking to those guys about one of my favorite projects from the 1990s. I mean, it's really how I discovered Arthur Adams, one of my favorite comic book artists. It was through these cards. And so I think my experience is not that different than maybe others out there. So hope you enjoyed this episode. We really love talking to Bob and Tom. Always welcome to come back again. And that'll do it for this episode. Thank you guys for listening, for viewing, for rating, reviewing, and subscribing. And we'll see you next issue.